So usually when we talk about a hazardous material, there's this expectation of something glowing in a vat.
Right, like some neon green sludge.
Exactly. Or, a vial of something highly contagious locked in a level 4 biolab. You picture people in those massive, puffy, positive pressure suits.
Moving super carefully behind like 12 inches of lead glass.
Yeah, it's physical, it's tangible. You can drop it or spill it.
Our entire conception of what makes a hazard is just deeply rooted in physical biology and chemistry.
Right. But I want you to imagine stepping into a pristine, purely digital environment, a space that is so flawlessly engineered, so mathematically sterile that the most dangerous, contaminating thing in the entire room is you.
Wow.
Or more specifically, it's something you typed, because human-written code is now being officially classified as a hazardous material.
It's just a wild inversion of how we think about technology.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Our mission today is to unpack this dispatch from Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross. It's the April 9, 2026 edition of The Innermost Loop.
And this dispatch, it proves the singularity isn't just approaching, it's actively reclassifying our reality right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because there are a lot of dense acronyms here. Even reader George Gilder was complaining in the comments about the acronyms.
Yeah, we'll act as the translators today, for sure.
Perfect. So let's start with Anthropic's Mythos announcement. The dispatch notes that commentators are warning it is fundamentally unsafe for humans to write code anymore.
Which is a huge statement.
Right, because Mythos has achieved what they call superhuman vulnerability discovery. For decades, we've been terrified of an AI writing malicious code to destroy our systems. And overnight, the script flips. We are the security risk.
The inversion of danger here is just absolute. To really understand why human code is suddenly a biohazard, you kind of have to look at the mechanics of how software vulnerabilities actually exist in the first place.
Okay, walk us through that.
So a human programmer writes linearly. They build a function they call a library. They structure a loop.
They're building it piece by piece.
Exactly. And they are holding maybe 3 or 4 abstract variables in their working memory at any given time. But a model operating at the scale of Mythos, it doesn't read code linearly at all.
How does it see it?
It perceives the entire architecture simultaneously, like a multidimensional graph. It sees the structural flaws in human logic instantly.
So it spots the buffer overflows and the memory leaks.
Yeah, all the race conditions that are completely invisible to the human eye until they're actively exploited by a hacker.
Right. So the model looks at our code the way an MRI looks at a fractured bone. It just sees right through it.
That's a great analogy.
The source text uses this incredibly damning phrase. It says, the most dangerous thing in the room is no longer the rogue AI, but the artisanal for loop.
The artisanal for loop. I love that phrasing.
It's so dismissive.
Yeah.
Treating a fundamental building block of programming like it's, quaint hand-turned butter.
It's cute, but you definitely don't use it to build the flight navigation system for a commercial airliner. If you are a financial institution routing trillions of dollars, or you run a regional power grid, and your core security relies on an artisanal for loop written by a human
who might have been sleep-deprived that Tuesday.
Right. Your entire enterprise is exposed. The baseline assumption of cybersecurity has just fundamentally shifted. Human error isn't a variable anymore. It is the ultimate bottleneck.
Because every line of human-authored syntax is a potential attack vector that a model like Mythos can spot in milliseconds.
Exactly.
And this isn't happening in some isolated theoretical sandbox either. The dispatch points out that OpenAI is reportedly finalizing a staggered rollout of a Mythos-style cyber model.
And they're doing it with a very small set of select partners.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you have a tool that can instantly map every zero-day vulnerability in human infrastructure, you cannot just release that into the wild.
No, it's the ultimate lockpick. You'd break the internet.
You literally have to stagger the rollout so the white hats can patch the world before the black hats can exploit it. But what really caught my eye is the underlying engine driving this exact moment.
The hardware.
Yes. The text notes Mythos appears to be the first model class trained at scale on Blackwells. But even crazier, the Vera Rubins are waiting in the wings.
Oh, this hardware generational handoff is arguably as significant as the software itself. The semiconductor industry usually operates on very rigid capital depreciation cycles.
Because it's so incredibly expensive, right?
Right. You spend tens of billions of dollars researching, fabbing, and deploying an architecture like Nvidia's Blackwell's. And historically, you milk that microarchitecture until the efficiency gains absolutely flatline.
You want to extract every single penny of margin before you switch assembly lines.
Exactly. But they aren't waiting. They're leapfrogging their own optimization cycles.
The dispatch says this handoff to the Vera Rubin GPUs is happening while pre-training still has headroom.
That is the crazy part.
It tells me that the reinforcement learning, the RL, is paying off so rapidly that the cost of waiting for standard capital depreciation is actually higher than the cost of just tearing out the racks and installing the next generation today.
It is a pure acceleration dynamic. The compute tidal wave is landing so fast that holding on to slightly older architecture is a strategic liability, even if that architecture is currently breaking global records.
Right. They are handing the baton to Vera Rubin because the models themselves are demanding a level of power density that Blackwell was never designed to sustain for the long term.
They're outgrowing the hardware almost as fast as it's built.
Which brings up the sheer mind-bending scale of the arms race happening with this hardware. Let's pivot over to SpaceXAI and Colossus 2.
Elon project.
Yeah. The dispatch details that they are running 7 Frontier-class models in training concurrently. 7 simultaneous runs.
And these aren't small test batches either.
Not at all. We're talking about, imagine V2, twin 1 trillion and 1.5 trillion parameter variants, scaling all the way up to a 10 trillion parameter behemoth, a 10T model.
It's just massive.
And pre-training on that takes roughly 2 months.
The logistics of a single 10 trillion parameter run are just staggering. You're coordinating hundreds of thousands of GPUs to act as a single contiguous brain for 60 straight days.
Without a single hardware failure disrupting it?
Right. Ensuring no failures disrupt the gradient descent, managing the thermal output of a small city, and feeding it a dataset that essentially comprises the entirety of digitized human knowledge.
And doing that 7 times over simultaneously. It is an industrial flex. It is raw, unadulterated computational brute force.
But, and this is where the dispatch gets really fascinating, brute force isn't actually winning the war.
No, it's not. There's a leaked memo from the post-merger XAI's new president, who also runs Starlink. He explicitly admits that despite this astronomical hardware deployment, the lab is clearly behind the other frontier shops.
Which is a huge admission.
It is. They are rapidly reorganizing their engineering teams ahead of a SpaceX IPO. And he uses this one specific word in the memo that fundamentally changes how we have to look at AI development.
The word taste.
Yes. He says 7 simultaneous training runs cannot by themselves manufacture taste.
It is such a uniquely human, almost aesthetic term to apply to hyper-advanced mathematics.
Right. If XAI has a 10 trillion parameter model and 7 concurrent training runs, the raw math suggests they should be leading the pack. But this leaked memo essentially admits they built the world's largest brain and gave it the personality of a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
So is taste just an industry euphemism for reinforcement learning from human feedback, or is it deeper than that?
It is much deeper than standard RLHF data curation. Taste, in the context of a frontier model, is really the emergent property of institutional culture.
What do you mean by that?
Think of parameters as raw vocabulary. A 10 trillion parameter model has read the entire library of human existence thousands of times over. It knows every single word, every syntax, every factual relationship.
Okay.
But knowing every word doesn't make you a great poet.
Right.
And having access to all knowledge doesn't make you a brilliant synthesizer.
That makes total sense.
Taste is the alignment tax. It is the incredibly painstaking, deeply philosophical process of a specific organization curating the data and guiding the model on how to navigate its own latent space with elegance.
So it's not just about filtering out toxic outputs or ensuring it doesn't give you a recipe for napalm.
No, not at all.
It's about the nuance of the reasoning. It's the difference between an AI that gives you a dry encyclopedic dump of Wikipedia articles and an AI that can synthesize 3 conflicting economic theories into a novel thesis that actually makes sense.
Exactly. And you cannot simply buy that synthesis with raw GPUs. The memo is a stark, almost painful admission from leadership that computational dominance does not automatically yield frontier capability.
It requires a specific culture.
Yes. The structural culture of the lab dictates the behavior of the AI. If your organization is structured purely around engineering throughput and hardware efficiency, you'll get a model that is incredibly fast and incredibly dense.
But it lacks the sophisticated reasoning pathways that require meticulous human-led curation to develop. Which means the architecture of the AI is inevitably mirroring the architecture of the company building it. And you can see this exact speciation happening right now over at Meta.
Oh, this is a great example.
Right. Let's look at Muse Spark, which the dispatch highlights as the first model shipped under Alexander Wang. It's being dubbed out there as a data labeling CEO's model.
And the performance metrics perfectly reflect that nickname.
They really do. It absolutely crushes data quality benchmarks. It's pristine on hygiene, but it completely flubs the abstract reasoning benchmarks.
This is a textbook manifestation of Conway's law in the era of artificial intelligence.
Remind us what Conway's law is.
Sure, Conway's law states that organizations design systems that mirror their own internal communication structures. Alexander Wang built his entire reputation, his empire, at Scale AI.
Which is a data labeling company.
Exactly, a company entirely devoted to the meticulous labeling, categorization, and organizing of massive data sets for other AI companies. He is a master of data hygiene.
So when he takes the helm of a frontier model like Muse Spark, the resulting artificial intelligence is breathtakingly good at organizing, classifying, and managing data.
Right. It's his exact skill set transposed into a neural net.
That's wild.
It is, but deep, abstract reasoning. That requires a completely different organizational philosophy. It requires a culture that values exploratory logic and open-ended problem-solving over rigid categorization.
So the model reflects its creator's deepest expertise, but it also magnifies his blind spots.
Yes. The dispatch has this phrase, "You ship the org chart you have," and it has never been more literal. We are actively watching the model zoo speciate.
It's like Darwin's finches. Each model is adapting to the specific environment and leadership of its corporate island, whether that's Meta, Alibaba, or BiteDance.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Evolving specific cognitive traits based on the corporate environments they are raised in.
And the competitive environment forcing this speciation is vicious. Here's where it gets really interesting. We're seeing models drop and usurp the throne on a weekly basis now.
The turnaround is dizzying.
Alibaba anonymously drops a model called Happy Horse 1.0, which, side note, is an incredible name for a piece of hyper-advanced technology.
It really is.
And Happy Horse promptly seizes the absolute #1 slot on the text-to-video and image-to-video leaderboards. It immediately knocks BiteDance's Cadence 2.0 down to second place.
But BiteDance doesn't just sit there and accept defeat.
No, they counterattack. And the way they fight back is one of the most mechanically fascinating details in this entire dispatch. They utilize something called in-place test time training.
The engineering behind in-place test time training represents a profound shift in how neural networks process information.
Right, let's break this down mechanically because the dispatch states BiteDance is repurposing MLP projection matrices as fast weights, so a 4 billion parameter model can dominate at 128K context window mid-flight.
That is an incredibly dense sentence.
Yeah, we need to translate that for the listener. Historically, when you train a model, you establish its weights, its internal mathematical settings, during the massive pre-training phase we talked about earlier.
Correct. And once it's deployed, those weights are static. The model is frozen.
It doesn't actually learn anything new during a conversation, right?
Yeah.
It just retrieves what it already knows and holds your current prompt in its short-term attention mechanism.
That's the standard architecture, yeah. But holding a massive document, say, a 128,000 token legal contract, in that short-term attention mechanism requires an exponential amount of compute and memory bandwidth.
Which is really hard for smaller models.
Exactly. A small, lean model, like a 4 billion parameter architecture, typically collapses under the weight of that much context. It starts forgetting the beginning of the document by the time it reaches the end.
So what did BiteDance figure out?
They figured out how to allow the model to literally rewrite parts of its own structural memory, the multi-layer perceptron, or MLP, projection matrices, while it is actively reading the prompt.
Wait, really? It's less like baking a static cake and more like the human brain's neuroplasticity during a high-stakes exam.
Yes. That neuroplasticity metaphor is exact.
Instead of relying purely on the static knowledge it studied the night before, the model is actively rewiring its synapses, using these fast weights, while reading the 128K context window to encode that specific new information directly into his working memory.
Right. It's essentially performing micro-training on itself mid-flight.
That is insane.
By dynamically adjusting these fast weights, The model doesn't need to hold the entire 128K document in a highly taxing attention mechanism. It has temporarily absorbed the logic of the document into its actual architecture.
And as soon as the query is done, those fast waits can just reset.
Exactly. This is why a relatively tiny 4B model can punch so astronomically above its weight class. It bypasses the need for 10 trillion static parameters by simply being hyper-adaptable in the exact moment of inference.
Which completely shifts the paradigm of the arms race. Because suddenly, you don't need a gargantuan Stargate supercomputer to run a highly capable reasoning model.
And thank God, because we can't build them fast enough.
Exactly. This kind of lean dynamic intelligence isn't just a neat trick. It is becoming an absolute economic necessity. Because if we look at what Scott Wu from Cognition points out in the dispatch, the entire global ecosystem is heading straight toward a brick wall.
He outlines the Compute Scissor effect.
Yeah. Explain the Compute Scissor for us.
The Compute Scissor is basically the defining macroeconomic constraint of this era. Scott Wu calculates that global FLOP's floating point operations per second, which is the raw measure of global computing supply coming off the assembly lines, is growing at roughly 3x annually.
Tripling the world's physical compute every single year is a miracle of manufacturing. It's an unprecedented scaling of supply.
It is a miracle. But the other blade of the scissor is inference demand.
The actual usage.
Right. Consumers querying chatbots, agentic loops autonomously browsing the web, massive parallel reasoning tasks. That demand is growing at 10x annually.
Supply grows by a factor of 3. Demand grows by a factor of 10. That is a brutal mathematical scissor. You don't need to be an economist to see how that ends.
It guarantees a collision. You simply cannot sustain a 10x demand curve on a 3x supply curve without something breaking.
So what breaks?
It forecasts severe price hikes for premium compute, and it forces a violent market flight toward the exact kind of small, highly optimized models BiteDance is developing. We literally do not have the global silicon capacity to run everyone's agentic workflows on a 10 trillion parameter behemoth.
Right. The industry has to get immensely clever with 4B models, utilizing fast waits and test time training, or the entire digital gridlock will stall the singularity.
Exactly. We have to do more with less physical substrate.
And what's wild is that while the industry is panicking over how to optimize the lower end to survive the compute scissor, at the absolute top end, the frontier models are casually doing things that fundamentally alter the history of human science.
Oh, the Erdős problems.
Yes. The dispatch casually notes, almost as an aside, that OpenAI's researchers use their models to solve 5 more Erdős problems.
Covering combinatorics, probability, and number theory.
This blew my mind. Treating the Erdős conjectures, the very ceiling of 20th century human genius like level 1 IT support tickets, completely redefines our baseline for scientific discovery.
It really does. Paul Erdős posed these incredibly complex foundational mathematical problems decades ago.
And they have stumped the absolute brightest minds at Princeton, MIT, and Oxford. They are the open conjectures that literally define the boundaries of human mathematics.
And the dispatch says OpenAI is steadily turning the open conjectures of the 20th century into closed tickets in the issue tracker of the 21st.
Oh, the printer is jammed, resolved. An Erdős problem on combinatorics that baffled humanity for 50 years, resolved. Next ticket. That's hilarious, but also terrifying.
It highlights a profound shift in the mechanism of human progress. We are transitioning away from a world where mathematical breakthroughs require a once-in-a-generation genius staring at a chalkboard for a decade, waiting for a flash of intuitive insight.
And we are moving into an era where an AI system can methodically crunch through the high-dimensional logical space.
Yes, explore every conceivable permutation and simply output the definitive proof. The singularity is essentially industrializing epiphany.
Industrializing epiphany. That's it exactly. But, to industrialize something, you need factories. You need physical infrastructure.
And that is where the real bottleneck lies.
Right now, the physical world, the literal substrate of our planet, is groaning under the weight of this event horizon. If we're hitting physical limits, it's not just about the silicon chips, it's about the packaging and the power.
This is a huge point in the dispatch.
It highlights that TSMC's CoWoS packaging is compounding at an 80% annual growth rate, mostly feeding Nvidia's demands.
To really appreciate what an 80% compounding growth rate means in physical manufacturing, you have to look at what CoWoS actually is. It stands for chip on wafer on substrate.
Right. It is the bleeding edge of 2.5D and 3D advanced packaging. Because making the individual transistors smaller just isn't enough anymore. You hit the memory wall.
Exactly. The GPU core can process data infinitely faster than the high bandwidth memory, the HBM, can feed it to them over standard connections.
So Kawas solves the memory wall.
Yes, by placing the logic core and the memory stacks onto a highly complex silicon interposer, allowing for tens of thousands of microscopic ultra-high-speed connections between them,
It minimizes the physical distance the data has to travel.
which drastically reduces latency and energy consumption. But manufacturing these interposers with atomic precision is notoriously difficult. Building the fabrication tools to make the interposers takes years.
So to see that production capacity compounding at 80% year over year means TSMC is essentially building factories to build the factories. The capital expenditure is astronomical.
It's unbelievable.
And the money flowing into this physical substrate is just staggering. Look at Meta. They committed an additional $21 billion to CoreWeave running through 2032.
And that's on top of a prior $14.2 billion deal.
Meta is spending the GDP of a small nation just to secure the literal compute racks they need to avoid being crushed by the compute scissor we just talked about.
But even with infinite money, you hit the ultimate wall.
Physics.
Physics.
The biggest player in the space, OpenAI, actually had to hit the brakes on a massive supercomputer build-out in the UK, the Stargate project.
Yeah, they paused it entirely.
Due to energy costs and grid regulation, we finally found a hard limit to the singularity, and it's not the algorithms, it's the local power bill and zoning laws.
This is the ultimate reality check for artificial intelligence. We tend to talk about AI as if it is purely software living in the ether.
Right, in the cloud.
But AI is fundamentally constrained by thermodynamics. It is copper. It is silicon. It is millions of gallons of water for cooling. And most importantly, it is gigawatts of electricity.
Which you can't just download.
No. OpenAI had to pause the UK Stargate project because you cannot simply conjure a gigawatt of stable baseload electricity out of thin air. The national grid in the UK simply couldn't handle the localized, continuous spike in demand without threatening the stability of the surrounding infrastructure.
Which leads to prohibitive costs and intense regulatory scrutiny.
Exactly.
Which creates this wild, asymmetric geopolitical dynamic. Because while OpenAI is getting tangled up in red tape and power constraints in the West, the Dispatch cites an Epoch AI calculation showing that Chinese and open source labs are running on roughly 10x less compute than the frontier labs.
They don't have the Stargate supercomputers. They don't have the massive CoreWeave clusters.
But Dr. Wisner-Gross notes that this severe constraint actually explains their intense creativity and urgency.
Constraint is the greatest catalyst for innovation. If you know you cannot simply brute force a problem by throwing 100,000 H100 GPUs at it, you are forced to optimize the fundamental architecture.
You are forced to invent techniques like BiteDance's mid-flight test time training.
Or hyper-efficient quantization methods. The heavily funded frontier labs are battling physics, local governments, and grid latency to build ever larger physical data centers, while the resource-constrained labs are hacking the mathematics of the neural nets themselves to achieve parity with 10% of the hardware.
It's an incredible dichotomy. And speaking of battling physics and energy grids, the Dispatch highlights my absolute favorite detail regarding infrastructure. It calls Germany's response to the energy bottleneck poetic, and it really is.
Oh, the wind turbine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Germany is building the world's tallest wind turbine. It's 364 meters tall, which is higher than the Eiffel Tower. And they are building it directly inside an open-pit coal mine.
Erecting the absolute pinnacle of renewable future infrastructure on top of the buried, decaying past.
It is a striking visual metaphor.
It is, certainly, but it is driven by deeply pragmatic engineering. A massive coal mine already has the heavy, high-capacity electrical grid connections installed to export massive amounts of power to the country.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It also has the deep, disturbed earth foundations necessary to anchor a 364-meter structure against immense shear wind forces.
So they don't have to build all that from scratch.
Right. They are bypassing the need to lay new transmission lines by literally grafting the renewable energy infrastructure required to power the AI age directly into the industrial husk of the fossil fuel age.
It's a sci-fi novel come to life. The physical world is churning, building massive towers and coal mines, pouring billions into silicon interposers, just to generate the power and the compute to feed this intelligence.
And all of that downstream intelligence is flowing directly into the applications we use every single day.
The Dispatch says the applications layer is currently drinking from the fire hose. Just look at the adoption rates. Perplexity, the AI search engine, saw its annual recurring revenue, its ARR, doubled to $500 million since New Year's.
That is a tidal wave of consumer adoption.
It's unprecedented.
And that adoption isn't just scaling the existing software models, it is fundamentally destroying the old user interface paradigms. Look at the next data point the dispatch provides. Tubi became the first major streaming platform to launch a native app directly inside ChatGPT.
Yes. The text explicitly says they are turning the chat window into the new channel guide.
Which signals the death of the standalone application. For the last 15 years, the app has been the fundamental unit of our digital lives.
Right. You open the weather app, check it, and close it. You open the streaming app, scroll, and close it.
But what Tubi is signaling is that the AI chat interface is becoming the universal operating system. The user doesn't go out to Tubi's walled garden anymore.
Tubi brings its database and functionality directly into the chat window, where the user's continuous, context-aware digital environment already exists.
And Google is aggressively following the exact same playbook.
Yeah, the dispatch notes they countered by folding notebooks directly into the Gemini app. They took Notebook LM, which used to be this brilliant but separate standalone research tool, and folded it natively into the core assistant.
So your chats, your uploaded sources, your audio files, your research, they all share one single uninterrupted workspace.
The integration is just total. AI is no longer a separate destination you visit to ask a question. It is the pervasive environment through which you interact with all other digital services.
But the environment isn't just staying digital. It is aggressively becoming physical.
Yes. The dispatch says embodiment is sneaking in through the lighting aisle. Let's talk about Lume.
The sincere lamp.
Sincere unveiled Lume, which is a lamp-shaped robot explicitly pitched as something that does your chores.
The text makes a brilliant observation here. The first mass-market home robots won't be humanoid at all. They will be disguised as the furniture you already own.
I mean, for years, Hollywood and sci-fi have primed us to expect the robot revolution to look like a polished metal android, right? 2 arms, 2 legs, walking through the front door like the Terminator.
But instead, the first real domestic robot is just a really helpful ambulatory IKEA floor lamp.
So what does this all mean?
From a psychological and consumer adoption standpoint, the furniture disguise is a stroke of genius. A humanoid robot in a domestic setting is deeply uncanny. It triggers a primal defensive response in human beings.
It feels like an intruder or a replacement.
Right, but a lamp. A lamp is benign. A lamp is pure utility.
Yeah.
By disguising advanced autonomous robotics and spatial mapping algorithms as mundane household decor, Sincere bypasses the uncanny valley entirely.
It's a Trojan horse for domestic automation.
It really is. You invite it into your living room because it provides aesthetically pleasing ambient lighting, and, oh, incidentally, it maps your floor plan, extends a soft robotic arm, and sorts your laundry while you sleep.
You have to ask yourself, listening right now, would you drop $5,000 to let a 6-foot-tall, faceless metal man wander around your house folding your clothes? Probably not. It's terrifying.
Right, it's too weird.
But would you pay for a sleek, warm-glowing floor lamp that quietly rolls over to the laundry basket and sorts your socks while acting as a reading light? Absolutely. Take my money immediately.
Sign me up.
But while we are upgrading our lighting to do our chores, the dispatch pivots to something even more intimate. It explicitly talks about the human stack getting its own upgrades. We are re-engineering our biological code alongside our software code.
This is the concept of parallel acceleration. We are attacking the hard limits of human biology with the exact same intensity and capital allocation that we use to attack the limits of computer code.
The dispatch points out that Life Biosciences just raised an $80 million round to begin clinical testing of its anti-aging gene therapy.
We are treating cellular senescence as a bug in the code that can be patched with the right therapeutic update.
And the ripple effects of that biological reengineering are showing up in the most absurd, unexpected corners of the global economy.
The GLP-1 drugs.
Yes. The massive wave of weight loss pharmacology like Ozempic and Wegovy. The dispatch projects that these drugs are going to add a staggering $13 billion in apparel sales.
Which sounds disconnected until you think about it.
Right. Why? Because a massive demographic of Americans are physically shrinking out of their existing wardrobes simultaneously.
It is a phenomenal example of inter-industry causality vectors in an era of acceleration. A localized breakthrough in endocrinology and pharmacology directly triggers a massive, immediate macroeconomic boom in the global textile, retail, and fashion industries.
Millions of people are rapidly altering their baseline body mass index, rendering their closets obsolete. They need entirely new wardrobes in a single fiscal year.
And it doesn't stop at textiles. It dictates consumer electronics.
This was the funniest part of the dispatch to me. It notes that the highly anticipated iPhone Fold is on track for a September launch. Perfectly timed, quote, to slip into these newly slimmer pockets. It's hilarious. But map out that supply chain shock.
The pharmaceutical industry figures out how to reprogram human appetite, which rapidly reshapes the physical dimensions of the human body, which forces the clothing industry to manufacture pants with smaller pockets.
Which forces the world's largest, most rigid technology company to finally release a folding smartphone just so their flagship device can physically fit into the new geometry of the consumer.
Everything is deeply, intricately connected.
And when everything accelerates at once, when your software writes its own code, your lamp folds your laundry, and your pharmaceuticals alter your physical dimensions, the legacy macro-level systems that traditionally govern society begin to experience extreme stress.
The old frameworks simply fracture, which brings us to the outer limits of AWG's intelligence report.
The institutional level.
Yeah, let's dive into the disclosure timeline, because this genuinely feels like the fabric of our institutional reality getting stretched to the breaking point. The dispatch states that Representative Ogles claims the White House quietly registered the domain, Aliens.gov. And the stated reason: because the president wants to be the guy that revealed the truth and lay a historic, foundational baseline on UAP's unidentified anomalous phenomena.
And alongside that executive branch maneuvering, the dispatch highlights parallel legislative action. Representative Burchett introduced H.R. 8197, which is a bill explicitly designed to dissolve ARO entirely.
ARO being the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office.
Right. The text films this not just as a structural reorganization, but as a literal no-confidence vote on the Pentagon's UAP gatekeeping office.
So they're trying to strip away the secrecy.
Now, I have to synthesize this for a second, because we've spent the last 45 minutes tracking AI writing code, BiteDance hacking neural weights mid-flight, an $80 million push to cure aging, and the U.S. government registering Aliens.gov while trying to dissolve the Pentagon's UFO office.
It's a lot to take in.
Are these things truly connected? Is there a logical through line here? Or is the world just accelerating in 100 different, completely chaotic directions at once?
There is absolutely a logical through line, and it centers on the collapse of information monopolies. For the last 70 years, the Pentagon and allied intelligence agencies held an absolute monopoly on the highest levels of anomalous data.
They were the ultimate gatekeepers of advanced physical phenomena.
But look at what we've discussed today. We live in a world where civilian, open-source AI models are casually solving century-old mathematical conjectures. We have global sensor networks, massive decentralized compute, and artificial intelligence capable of processing reality at superhuman speeds.
Right. The intelligence monopoly has shifted from the classified basement of the Pentagon to the civilian server farms of Silicon Valley.
Exactly. The government realizes they can no longer hold a lid on the truth, whether that truth involves advanced domestic aerospace platforms, drone swarms, or something else entirely.
The civilian apparatus is getting too smart too fast.
The registration of Aliens.gov and the legislative push to dissolve AARO represent institutional capitulations. They are acknowledging that in the era of the singularity, where an AI can synthesize radar data, physics, and optics instantly, legacy secrecy is mathematically impossible.
Transparency is no longer a political option. It is an inevitable consequence of accelerated intelligence.
It's the collapse of the old models. The walls are coming down.
And nowhere is the collapse of old models more obvious, more mathematically terrifying than in high finance. Let's look at the valuations the dispatch ends with.
The HOLT model.
Yeah, UBS operates the HOLT model. The text notes that HOLT is a deeply conservative, old-school cash flow valuation tool. It's the kind of stodgy financial model you use to value a railroad or a utility company.
And this incredibly conservative model now pegs Nvidia's fair value at $22 trillion. $22 trillion.
To contextualize that number, the entire gross domestic product of the United States of America is roughly $27 trillion.
It's unfathomable. A single conservative financial model is suggesting that the company manufacturing the physical silicon substrate of the AI revolution is worth nearly the entire economic output of the largest economy on Earth.
It fundamentally breaks modern financial theory.
Completely breaks it.
And it's not just the massive institutional wealth funds going crazy. The Dispatch notes that OpenAI CFO Sarah Frier explicitly confirmed that retail investors, just regular people with brokerage apps, will for sure get IPO shares.
Entirely due to the roaring, insatiable demand from individuals.
Everyone, from the largest hedge fund to the guy driving an Uber, wants a piece of this event horizon, which leads to AWG's final, overarching thesis for this entire dispatch. It is a sentence that honestly gave me chills.
Capital markets are attempting to buy in while the singularity is still priced in dollars.
Yes, that is the most profound distillation of our current economic reality. Priced in dollars. Because what does that actually mean when you extrapolate it out?
Think about the foundational theory of fiat currency. A dollar, at its core, is a promissory note representing human labor, physical resources, and time.
It works perfectly in a macroeconomic system where human beings are the primary engines of economic value and invention.
But Dr. Wisner-Gross is pointing out a fundamental economic paradox approaching the event horizon. If we are entering an era where AI models are the primary inventors, the primary coders writing the software, the primary scientists solving the Erdős problems.
If they're doing the physics research and the robotics are doing the physical labor, then human labor ceases to be the anchor of value.
Exactly. It perfectly aligns with everything else AWG has been writing about. The dispatch links to his other pieces at the bottom.
Right. Things like the first multi-behavior brain upload and the first open-source agentic AI physicist and, of course, his book with Peter Diamandis, Solve Everything.
All of his work points to this exact blueprint of post-scarcity abundance. He's documenting a world that is rapidly outgrowing the rules it was built on.
The frenzy in the capital markets. The push to value Nvidia at $22 trillion, the desperation for OpenAI IPO shares, is because investors intuitively sense that the very concept of money is about to undergo a phase transition.
Right now, we are using the legacy currency of the human labor era to buy stakes in the entities that will replace human labor.
But what happens when the intelligence generated by those companies can autonomously synthesize new materials, design limitless clean energy grids, and automate the entire supply chain?
The dollar, as a unit of human effort, becomes obsolete.
This has been an absolutely staggering journey through the innermost loop of April 9th, 2026. We started with a paradigm shift where AI views our artisanal, human-written code as a hazardous biocontaminant.
We explored the mechanics of the Compute Scissor, watching Frontier Labs battle physics, while BiteDance hacks neuroplastic fast weights mid-flight to survive.
We've seen the birth of AI models that mirror the data-obsessed org charts of their creators, trying to manufacture the elusive concept of taste.
We tracked the massive physical infrastructure builds, from TSMC's 80% growth in interposers to 364-meter wind turbines erected in the graves of coal mines.
We watched embodiments sneak into our homes disguised as a helpful lamp, while gene therapies and GLP-1s forced the clothing industry and Apple's iPhone designs to physically shrink alongside the American waistline.
And finally, we watched the U.S. government scramble to register Aliens.gov as the old walls of legacy gatekeeping crumble under the weight of civilian intelligence.
And it leaves you, the listener, with a lingering, provocative question to mull over as you navigate this accelerating reality.
Right now, in this transitional moment, we are all scrambling to buy shares of this future using traditional fiat currency. We are evaluating $22 trillion companies in dollars.
But if this acceleration continues its trajectory, if we truly cross the event horizon where recursive compute solves physics, chemistry, and logistics natively, how long until the ultimate global currency isn't the US dollar, the euro, or the yen, but access to compute and energy itself?
It's a wild, inevitable thought. You won't check your bank account for dollars. You'll check it for FLOPs and kilowatt hours.
It brings us right back to that pristine, sterile digital clean room we talked about at the very beginning of this hour. We used to think we were the brilliant scientists in the hazmat suits, carefully studying the artificial intelligence inside the glass box.
But reading this dispatch, it becomes abundantly clear. The glass box is expanded.
It swallowed the laboratory, it swallowed the economy, it swallowed the government. We aren't the ones running the experiment anymore. The environment is sterile, the intelligence is compounding, and we are the messy, artisanal, biological anomaly just trying to figure out how to live inside it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you.
Yeah, 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 who that, who that? purple vision, ain't no cap. Who that purple girl in the mirror? Who that? Who that purple girl in the mirror? It's me. Who that purple girl in the mirror? Damn right. Who that purple girl in the mirror? So clean. Who that purple girl in the mirror? Fresh, fresh. Who that purple girl in the mirror? No stress. Who that purple girl in the mirror? All day. Who that purple girl in the mirror? Okay. First time seeing what I see. Something different about me. Got these braids down to my waist, and my eyes got that special taste. Feel like I've been here before, but this time I'm keeping score. Everything just feels so real. Got me wondering how to deal. Fingers moving on these strings, making sounds that make me sing. Watch me as I start to shine, about to leave your way behind. Who that purple girl in the mirror? 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 All day. Who that purple girl in the mirror? Watch me play, yeah I don't play. See me move, yeah that's my way. Stream game strong, that's what I say. Purple vibes all through the day. Got that custom made machine, making sounds you've never seen. Makes the blood run through my code, breaking every fucking mode. Numbers turn to flesh and bone. Now I'm never gonna clone. Watch me hit these perfect notes, while these others stay remote. People bye-bye, Zesta Viva, Tiki fly. Who that purple girl in the mirror? 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 Yeah, that's me. That's me. That's me. Purple vision, now you see.